Interesting.
And now Paul Crowhurst from the Chinese International School.
Okay, just before I start, I wanted to point out, you may want to take a reference of this at the end. I've set up a little wiki. You don't have to interact on it or anything like that, but it does have some of the information, including the poster. It has a paper that summarizes the research, and there's also my email address if you want the extended research publication, which you may or may not want, but it's closer to about 10,000 words, so I've summarized it to about 4,000 words, and that's on the wiki, including information about how you can contact me. I think like the way I want to sort of start this is just to explain a little bit about how I came to want to explore the interpersonal characteristics of teachers. And this project was in partial fulfillment of my master's degree that I did in New Zealand. Finished that a couple of years ago, and I started my master's degree with this thought of doing education and counselling, and I was interested in doing like counselling because I thought perhaps I would get into becoming a counsellor, a school counsellor, and I saw the value of the work they do, and I still do. And so after my first year, I thought, no, I don't want to do that for various reasons. But one of the things that I was able to explore was the humanistic influence on counselling. So most of you will be familiar with the three major forces in psychology, so Freudian, behaviourist, and humanistic, and the way that humanistic came out of this sort of view that Freudian thinking was too sort of rehabilitative, and the behaviourists were too sort of preventative in what they were trying to do, and that there needed to be like this reconception of psychology that was based on well-being and health and positive sort of thinking about the potential of humanity. So that's why it was called the humanistic movement psychology. And I discovered these guys that are quite well known now, especially in counselling and psychology circles, like Coombs and Rogers. And I was really interested because they started off as counsellors or psychologists, and then they moved into education. So they became teachers themselves at universities, and they really believed in the power of education to help somebody reach their potential and fulfill their life. So I said to my supervisor, who was supervising my research project, I said, this whole area is unknown now really to people coming through universities, undergraduates and so on, and I really want to explore this whole idea of the fact that a teacher can significantly impact the learning and their learners by just the personal connection they have with them. Nothing else, just the personal connection that they have with them. And that's not to say that other things aren't important, but that has a significant effect. And so she said, well, instead of doing like any primary research, look at doing an extended literature review. So that's what I did. And so I explored the humanistic move within education, and my goal was really to describe how that personal, or what kind of personal qualities effective teachers possess, and then in the paper I go into the dynamics of how those personal qualities influence students, how those the influence you have on students leads to enhanced learning. In this particular poster I haven't really elaborated because of space obviously on all the dynamics, so I've just sort of tried to describe what are the personal characteristics that these humanistic educators possess, or say that that teachers need to possess, and I've sort of left it at that more or less. But in the extended paper that you can get here, you can read a little bit more about that. And so, as I said, my method was to do an extended literature review. So I took a whole lot of different humanistic educators. I looked at them, I looked at what they'd done, I looked at studies that they'd done, and I tried to summarise the findings. So that was my approach. I mean, the fascinating part of it is that some of their approaches to research would nowadays be thought of as quite dubious. For example, one study, they basically lied to a whole lot of teachers and told them that the students that they had in their class were either good or bad at maths when they actually weren't. And so the teachers would go into a class that they'd been told, this is the top maths class in the school. A new teacher would come to the school, you get the top maths class, but they weren't actually the top maths class, they were a low maths class, and the teacher would walk in but just by way of the teacher going in and having these expectations that were different to what perhaps some would say they ought to have been, the students achieved more than would be expected of them. And but obviously that kind of thing would never get past an ethics committee now. But it was quite, I mean, this is back in the 60s, so some of the research they did, although quite enlightening, was a little bit, what we'd say, dodgy now. So I reviewed a whole lot of the research that was done, and I found basically I summarised the actual attributes that people display into 3 different things, and one of them was empathy, and empathy refers to a person's ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes, so to be able to perceive what the students need and what is best for the students, and that's kind of a main theme that runs through much of the writing by humanistic educators, is that effective teachers are empathetic, and that's not getting confused with sympathetic, because sympathy is different to empathy. Empathy's ability to see the world from another person's perspective. The other thing that, I there's lots of different descriptions for these things, and I just ended up using my own terms. I mean, empathy is a very clear one, but the other one is acceptance, and Carl Rogers calls this positive regard, and so that you actually positively regard the students that you're working with, even though they might do things that are wrong. You accept them for who they are, kind of like a parent would accept their child, knowing that their child can be a little rascal sometimes. They still accept their child because they're their child, and like a teacher who says, you're in my class, you're part of my team, that sort of have that kind of attitude, then that's the kind of thing that kids really respond to. The third thing, is authenticity, and so that's being real. Like, you're not trying to be a fake, you're who you are in the situation that you're in at that time in your class. So and being that, you also have the ability to be who you are. Okay, I've come today. You know what? My son was up all last night, and I'm actually quite grumpy today. You're real about who you are, how you're feeling, but never saying that how I'm feeling is an actual reflection of who you are. So you're making it clear to the kids that your feelings are your feelings, your thoughts are your thoughts. So these are the outward characteristics that I summarised, and there's some problem because you can have a list that just never stops, but I felt like in those 3 characteristics that summarised the type of personal qualities that a person needs, or an effective teacher has, that students respond to. This is informed by sort of internal qualities, and in the paper, if you read it, I call them overt and covert. So the overt are 1, 2, 3, empathy, acceptance, and authenticity, and covert or inward are like sort of beliefs or thoughts. And the 2 beliefs or thoughts that I managed to summarise them into were positive intentions. So you always have a positive intention towards your students, and your students know that when you say and do something, the reason behind it is positive. If you speak abruptly to them, they know that the intention behind what you're doing is typically a positive one, and you have high expectations. And by high expectations, I'm not talking about, okay, setting the bar way above what kids can do, but you believe in the potential that the kids have. So you're always walking around the class, interacting with the students in your class, doing what you do with the kids, with this expectation that they are able to meet quite lofty goals, that within them there is the potential to do some great things. And they're more intentions or inwardly held beliefs. These things, and this is just explained in this diagram here, these things, these overt and covert, or inward and outward qualities that teachers have, are informed by beliefs, the outward are what you sort of do, the inward are kind of like your beliefs, and the whole of all your qualities, the sum total of the qualities that you have, are basically influenced by the perception you have of yourself. And I haven't gone into that here, and I don't really have time to talk about that today, but a person's own perception of themselves, and this is, reasonably obvious, determines the level at which they can function effectively with and display the kind of personal attributes needed to engage kids and enter into an interpersonal relationship that is meaningful. The conclusions, let me just check my notes. So the conclusions that I sort of came to, one of the big questions is, like, are we perpetuating like this cycle of ineffectiveness, if that's a proper word, in the classroom, by thinking that if we just give teachers curriculum tools, then the quality of learning in the classroom will improve. And my answer to that is no, that it's actually the type of person that the teacher is, their social and emotional well-being plays a huge factor in their ability to function in the classroom as an effective professional. And like so much of what we do now is focused on this latest initiative, this latest pedagogical idea. This is what we're doing. Have you heard about flipping the classroom? Well, we've got to be flipping the classroom. Have you heard about this latest, like one-to-one laptops is going to revolutionize teaching? You've got to get up with the technology to make your classroom a meaningful place. And all these things are valid, but basically what I've said is they're tools. And there's a difference between tools and skills. So if you're a master craftsman, okay, you have your tools, but you also have your skills. And it's interpersonal skills that make a significant difference in the classroom. And so my three conclusions are really that professional learning, we need to have professional learning that promotes the growth of self-efficacy. Now, one thing I really forgot to mention was this here, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm not going to have time to talk about right now. But at the top is the goal, basically, which is that we become self-actualizing people. And that concept of self-actualization is very similar to agency, to self-regulation, to self-efficacy. And I know that technically they have slightly different definitions, but they all have quite a bit of similarity. So the interpersonal qualities in teachers and the interpersonal interaction helps to meet lower needs that are lower down. So like the need for self-esteem, for love, for safety, and so we need to. One of my conclusions I drew and I put forward is that we need to promote within teacher education and within schools development, professional learning that develops self, that develops our emotional and social well-being. And counsellors have this, do this really well. They have this idea of supervision, right? Where you have to see a supervisor so you can talk about issues, and a lot of the time those structures are set up in some schools and not others, but we need to make sure that we have a chance to grow personally as part of our professional development. The second thing is teachers need to be selected carefully. Often we think that people who get the best academic results will make the best teachers, and it's true, we need to get the best and brightest, but academic results are not necessarily what is needed for functioning in a classroom with 30 students, being able to manage those kids, have relationships with them, understand. So there's also this whole idea of emotional IQ, emotional intelligence, and the need to make sure that we don't just pick people based on academic, that we actually understand this concept of emotional intelligence and include that in teacher selection. And the third thing is, this is just about everyone's conclusion that they draw with researchers, there needs to be more research into this area. And what I did was I did a historical literature review, and so it really looked at stuff that was 30, 40 years old, and it's been forgotten. It was incredibly valuable to look at that, but a lot of that research, as I said, wouldn't stand up against the ethics committee today, and therefore, there really is a need to explore that now afresh, I think. So yeah, that was my